Margaret Cahirlock. I want to begin by welcoming the fact that it's my understanding that a special education needs organiser has now been put in place in County Laois. However, in County Offaly we are still awaiting for the special educational needs officer to be put in place. I did receive a response from the NCSE a number of weeks ago, which was quite definite in its language and stated that a CNO would be put in place by early July at the latest. But then I received a subsequent response which wasn't as definite, and that's what concerned me. It stated more or less that it was hoped or envisaged to have a CNO in place by July. But I just want to state here today that it's vital that a CNO be put in place in County Offaly as soon as possible. I have had a number of schools contact me, and also I've been inundated with the parents from special needs children who are very, very concerned, and I'm inundated with calls and indeed meetings with those parents. So I would ask for that to be done as soon as possible, because the CNO plays a critical role and a very, very important role in terms of planning for the child and in terms of allocating the resources or having the allocation of resources to a child as soon as possible. And the children really are being failed by the delay here, and I don't understand why there is such a delay, but I do hope that certainly by the end of July at the latest that we will see a CNO in Offaly. I would like some response on that, if at all possible as well, please, just to see where things are, Minister, if I could have an update in order to inform my constituents and the schools who have contacted me. I want to also state that it's very, very difficult for children with special educational needs in the education system, and that's down to the fact that they cannot access the speech and language therapies or the occupational therapies at an early point when they begin school. In many, many cases they're left waiting on long waiting lists, and I know that Laois Offaly has one of the longest waiting lists for speech and language and occupational therapy in the state. And I have many, many frustrated parents who come to me about this issue, and who cannot get a response in terms of when their child will receive a block of whether it be speech and language therapy or occupational therapy. And that does add, I suppose, to the whole frustration and upset that these parents have to go through. It's unnecessary. It's like, as many parents have said to me, they have to fight for everything all of the time. These parents are worn out fighting, and they just need more assistance and more communication. Now, I do understand that on the other side, in terms of the therapists, that there is a lack of therapists and that recruitment remains an issue. But I think that we have to communicate with the parents and let them know how things are going, or if we're going to see more speech and language therapists in Offaly and more occupational therapists, which are needed. And I would ask for that to be given top priority, because I know that as a TD for Laois Offaly, I've raised this issue since I was elected here as a TD in 2016, and here we are in 2022, and the same issue is being raised. And I know you would have heard it from other TDs, indeed in the constituency as well. But there is a problem, an ongoing problem, and we do need to see some progress in that regard. We need to get to the bottom of why there seems to be a problem recruiting the therapists. And also in terms of the Children's Disability Network teams, there seems to be problems there where there are vacancies. And I think, there needs to be some in-depth review done as to why there are issues and why staff don't want to come in and take up those positions, because that's the only way that we're going to be able to move forward and get to grips with the situation, which is impacting negatively unfortunately, on the children. And we know that in this state, every child is entitled to a high-quality education. That's clearly stated in our Education Act of 1998. We know from the proclamation of 1916, it's stated that every child should be cherished equally. But we have a situation where the gaps are so, they're gaping so much that each and every child isn't cherished equally. And we have so much disadvantage and indeed so much negative impacts on children because of the lack of forward planning and because of the lack of consultation and communication with other agencies and other bodies. And indeed it has been pointed out as well that there is a blatant lack of coordination We should have more coordination between the services and the schools. And if the schools need to become the point of contact and involving the parents, of course, that's vital. I mean, we have an independent education plan process. I remember drawing up the individual education plans as a teacher many years ago. And those plans stressed the importance of collaboration. But yet we see a breakdown in collaboration because there's no coordination between therapists and schools and parents. And I think we need to be able to bring all of that together. But it has to happen soon. It can't just be talked about. It needs to become a reality. In the Ireland of 2022, we cannot leave children behind. And children, unfortunately, are being left behind if they happen to have special education needs or if they happen to come from a disadvantaged community. They are certainly left behind, and that needs to be addressed. If we're serious about inclusion here, and there's fine words thrown about this chamber all of the time, but they're not matched with action. And I would call for that to happen. I think we need to get the basics right. Access to therapies is a basic thing. It's a basic right. We ratified the UN Convention on the Rights of People with Disabilities a number of years ago here, and unfortunately Ireland was one of the last countries to do so. But yet we're not seeing services coming up to standard or being brought up to standard. So I would appeal for that to be done. I know another outstanding and ongoing issue in my own constituency of Laois Offaly, which is causing much frustration and upset for parents, is the lack of school places. I have dealt with many parents of children who are pleading for action on this issue, and indeed I have written two CNOs from other counties who I believe are serving County Offaly at the minute while we await our own CNO to be put in place. But there is huge frustration and anxiety around this issue. I've spoken to parents of children in my offices in Bor and Tullamore who tell me that their child will have to travel 30 to 40 kilometres if they cannot get a school place at second level, if they can't be facilitated. And that's very, very unfair on a child who has enough to cope with and contend with. To expect that child to go on a bus and travel 30 to 40 kilometres every day is just so unfair and so wrong. And I know it's happening. I know it's definitely happening in other areas of the country. But it needs to stop. I think there needs to be some planning done here and some urgent action over the summer recess. And I would hope that those children will be accommodated and will be catered for by the end, hopefully, by the end of August and beforehand, if at all possible, in order to give people time to plan for the transition. But it does need to be taken on board, and it does need to be dealt with very quickly indeed. I know that the challenges in respect of appropriate school places, are linked to the issue of forward planning or lack of forward planning. And for the organisation called As I Am, who does fantastic work, they have stated that today's crisis is a long time in the making in terms of the lack of school places. The lack of appropriate school places is due in part to the culmination of a lack of forward planning, forward thinking and coordination by a number of key stakeholders. On the 31st of May 2022, it was reported that Minister Madigan indicated that these proposals were at an early stage. However, in the same article and others, it was also reported that these plans were no longer in train. In a meeting last week, campaign groups outlined their concerns to the Minister and other department officials, who told them that the proposal is in an early stage and that no decision has yet been made on the matter. But speaking after the meeting, Minister Madigan said that the proposal was very much in its infancy and that there had been a lot of misinterpretation or misperception about what it is meant to be. But it had been reported that the proposal has now been abandoned due to the lack of support from campaigners as well as concerns with government. I would ask for, as I said, I think there needs to be a sense of urgency with school places, with forward planning. The Children's Ombudsman has also raised concern about this very issue. Dr Niall Muldoon noted that he had initiated this report for two reasons. That it was initiated in anticipation of the review of 37A and that we hope that the report will be released, and that obviously that appropriate school places will become a reality. And certainly when we see all of these organisations and the Children's Ombudsman raising the alarm, it's certainly time to take action. Action is long overdue. Garab Margaret.